this all started sort of before lockdown. It was while everyone was self-isolating, and I know I've told many of you the story before, but there are new people on here and it keeps on growing. So I'm just going to go through it again. And for Lars. So I got sent a picture saying, oh, this is the wine we're drinking in isolation. I said, oh, that's a delicious wine. This is the wine I'm drinking. It's also a delicious wine. And we decided, no, what we need to do is actually go buy a whole lot of wines. So we've got a whole group of people with the same wines that you can get at Pick and Pay or Woolies. We were aiming so they could get delivered, but that didn't happen. And then people could choose the wines that are accessible. You know, we're not looking, we just wines that are accessible, that we can sit and share information about, tell stories about, and then do some socializing on the Zoom. And that's where we are. And it's now grown. This is the 16th tasting we've done. We've had, I think, you the 10th or the 11th wine owner or winemaker that has been on. So it's started to really get a nice momentum, and it's helped people build relationships with wines. Because for me, you know, I've got this thing called Harry's Big Wine Adventure. I'm also into wine education with the Cape Wine Academy. But for me, the whole thing is that wine's a social tool, put on this earth to help people engage, bring people together, eye contact, storytelling, food around a table, those kind of things. And unfortunately, for most people, wine is intimidating, which is the exact opposite of what wine is intended for.
Absolutely agree.
So I was delighted because I've done a little bit of reading, and you know, I saw in one of the things that was written about you, about how you want to remove any pretentiousness from wine, and you want people just to come in and enjoy themselves, go home with a bottle and a story, so that you can just enjoy the experience, and actually it makes the wine more memorable.
Yeah. So if I can just exactly that, I think my problem that we find in our wine tasting is that people come and then they have either John Platter guide or newspaper article or something, and then they go and consult my staff and say, so what is good? And our message really out there is, if you go into a gallery, you choosing a picture that you like, not that the gallery owner likes. So because everybody's taste is different, and you know, we don't want to intimidate anybody with wine knowledge or not knowledge, because it really comes down to your personal taste. And if you like your wines fruity, then buy fruity wines. If you like them wooded, buy wooded wines. I mean, we don't want to be prescriptive of, you know, this is a highly rated wine, so that's our best wine, and you have to buy that. I think that is the wrong message. And if you go, and I mean, now this is where sort of every Saturday we have about 1,000 people in the lawn, so it's very festive. And most of the people that, I mean, my son is a student at Stellenbosch University, but on weekends he and all his mates are working here. So it's young, it's jovial, and it's relaxed. And we want to take that stigmatism of wine being so verkrumped, take that away and just say, look, just drink what you enjoy. And we trying to make, obviously, wines as charming as possible. We have some heavyweights, we have some really difficult buggers that are not easy to drink, and those wines are interesting, but you know, and we like wine to be controversial as well. But in general, you want a wine to be charming. And again, if you go into a gallery, you're not going to the owner and say, look, I need a painting 50 centimeters by 1 meter, and choose something for my living room. You know what you want, you know what you like and what you dislike. And I think the same must be with wine. And if it happens to be the cheapest wine, then you even save more money, you know, instead of me talking you into something really expensive. So I think wines initially have to be, if you look at it, you know, have to be charming, and you know, and then every wine has a different purpose as well. So whatever I have in the morning with my muesli obviously tastes different than what I have with a steak at nighttime, you know.
No, exactly. I would never have a full Bordeaux blend with my muesli.
Exactly.
I mean, and I know from Brad's perspective, he often, and I think it's actually part of the ilk of Buitenverwachting, where he gives people a tastings and he doesn't tell them what it is. He says just drink them and taste them, because there's quite a few people doing this, and I know Brad is one of them, and I suppose you, where you don't want to go in with a preconceived idea of what the wine is. So if someone tells you that this is a Sauvignon Blanc, you either hate Sauvignon Blanc or you love it. And so you've already now making decisions about the wine before actually even tasting it. And I know that the Buitenverwachting tries not to do that.
So, the two wines I have in front of me now, and that's maybe two good examples. The one on my left-hand side here on this one is exactly the same wine as you have in your glass. It's the 2019 Sauvignon Blanc, which we just say is the consensus Sauvignon. And then we've got the Hasses Flay. So the one sells for 110, somewhere there, depends where you go shopping. And the Hasses Flay sells for 180 to close to 200. So everybody goes like, wow, that must be the better wine. My favorite wine is this one. And just because the Hasses Flay is more expensive doesn't mean it's necessarily the better wine. So my favorite is the Constantia Sauvignon. And the Hasses Flay is my wife's favorite. Funny enough, if you do the translation on Hasses Flay, it means the Lake of the Sluts. So I don't know what my wife is, why she's intrigued in that one. But the Constantia one is a lot more charming. And what I'm looking for in a Sauvignon is, I find that a lot of my friends, we've lost them to Sauvignon because Sauvignon tends to be quite herbaceous and comes with a greenness and a certain way of aggressiveness. So it's fresh, but it's also quite aggressive. And what Constantia allows you, yeah, exactly, green peppers. And that's what the Hasses Flay is about. But the Constantia one, we try to go as ripe fruit Sauvignon as possible. And we want sort of more the yellow fruit flavors, which is the Cape gooseberries, the melons, the yellow apples. And to me, that is, first of all, quite unique in South Africa. But secondly, it's just so delicious to drink. The Hasses Flay for me is too loud. And too demanding. So when I go home after busy day, I want to relax. I want to unwind. I want somebody to like tickle me on my neck and stuff. And that's what the Constantia Sauvignon does. The Hasses Flay is something that I open on a more special occasion, but I have to be relaxed. And I have to be able to deal with a wine that is more demanding. And it's a wine that you communicate with. So your first glass is different to, the wine evolves over an hour. It transforms tremendously, but it takes more effort to drink the wine. And I'm not always in a mood to make that kind of effort with a wine. Sometimes I'm in a mood where the wine has to make an effort for me. And that is the difference between those two guys. Here is the guy who says, look, like my wife, demanding, I have to make an effort. And this is something that looks after me, pleases me, relaxes me, unwinds me. And I like, look, I had a long, hard day. And I just had this, and I go like, oh, charming. It's nice to have your company. And this guy, after a hard day, makes it even harder. No, I'm not drinking that. I leave that bottle for my wife.
Your Buiten Blanc, and I know in the past it was maybe Chenin Blanc, but it's now it actually could be single variety Sauvignon classified. It's been a stalwart. It's been a go-to wine since it started. I mean, I think I've seen the Buiten Blanc in more households than any other. And we talk about the wines that you take to brides, and that's definitely one of them. And that also is a good example for your story. In terms of this Constantia Sauvignon Blanc, I heard of, or sort of by proxy met Lars, first of all through Holly and Joy now, who said I should get you on, but through a lady, I think I mentioned to you, there's a Finnish lady called Maria, and she asked me to give her a tasting at the Mount Nelson. She had 70 odd guests, and I think the Finns are quite strong characters, and she said, you will put Lars's Sauvignon Blanc on the list, the Constantia. You have to put it on. And I said, okay. She said, no, you have to. So I said, okay, cool. And I ended up tasting a lot of it. And I do know Buitenverwachting quite well just through visiting it there, and that lovely lawn and the tree. And that's why the theme is green today, actually. So just wanted to tell that little story.
Yeah, so if, with the Buiten Blanc, Buiten Blanc is sort of our, as you said, it's like our household wine. It's most probably what Brad refers to as our dream and our nightmare at the same time, because it is so popular. We have to make sure that the quality is consistent, but we also have to look at the volume that we're offering. And that makes it a nightmare because, you know, the bigger your volume, the more difficult it is to hold the quality. So we are capping it at where we stand at the moment. And what we do is, because the South African wine industry before COVID has already hit a tough time, and we are able to really buy amazing grapes from cool climate. And the major difference between our Sauvignon grapes and the Sauvignon grapes from other estates is that it sits on different soils, but temperature-wise, it's very similar. So we get from Kukenop, which is quite high up the west coast. It's a 3.5-hour drive from Cape Town, and so it's a bit of a schlep to go up there and just check those grapes. And then you know, then we have from Elgin, beautiful grapes as well. Some grapes from Constantia, and also from Durbanville. So Durbanville sits on slate, shale, and then in Elgin and further out in Hermanus it sits on sandstone. With us, it's on granite. So we've got all those different soil types, but the climate is more or less the same. So you get all those different expressions of Sauvignon, which we put together. And a wine selling at that price, we would normally spend about 3.5, maybe 4,000 Rand per ton. And we spend about 7,000 to 8,000 Rand a ton. So Buiten Blanc is a huge priority for us. That's a wine that we have to get right. If we mess that up, I think it will affect our reputation quite badly. Because half of what we sell is Buiten Blanc, and we've got to get that right. And the easiest way to get it right is to start at source, so get the best grapes, you know, possible. It's a huge pressure, but when you get it right, it's very rewarding.
But that's why it's such a worthwhile wine, because you've got all these cool climate grapes showing the best expressions of Sauvignon Blanc in a blend, Sauvignon Blanc basically blend, and for a ridiculous price. Just
kind of those two guys, you were holding up that green pepper.
Yeah.
So the Constantia Sauvignon is everything that grows on the everything that grows on the left side of the farm. So if you sit where I sit now and look south to you guys towards Cape Point, everything that we grow on the left hand side, it's got those charming yellow fruit flavors, and that's the majority we have on the farm. So when Sauvignon was more like popular, like what Cape Point is making, then the whole industry drove Sauvignon to be in quite a green style. And where Cape Point was, you know, was really amazing with the quality is that they had a very cool climate, low yields, and so they had a very rich green Sauvignon. But because Cape Point did so well, a lot of other estates wanted to follow suit, but they didn't really have the climate to support that. So they had green, but it was actually lean. And lean green without the body weight is a hard drink. And I think you will find now over the last 2-3 years, things have loosened up quite a lot. And there is, if you have the cooler climate, you can now try to push your ripeness, and then your Sauvignon goes from that green element into a riper yellow style, and which I think is a lot more charming. The problem is Sauvignon is heat sensitive, so if you're in a hot area, you can't do that, because Sauvignon will go from green flavors to no flavors. So in a hot area, you are forced to go, you know, more the greener style. And then here on the Hasselsvlei side, so which is the right hand side, it's I can actually show you a building here on the farm. Is that correct? Yeah. So that building there only sees the facade only sees direct sun for about 6 weeks in a year, and that's exactly the same location as our vineyards. So those vineyards are very sun deprived. When we harvest the reds, we will look into harvesting those Sauvignons as well. So they're about a month behind anybody else's Sauvignon, and they're still green flavors. But there they are, like the Cape Point, quite a intense, more richer green flavors. And then, you know, if you look at your green peppers, if you ripen them for longer, they turn from green to yellow to red. And in a way, Hasselsvlei does a similar thing. It doesn't go into red pepper flavors, but it transforms over about a 4 to 6 year period. It transforms from a green pepper flavor into a yellow pepper flavor, and I think that is really the strength of the Hasselsvlei. Stop taking feet here. Sorry, I gotta. Sometimes friends drink too much and they get silly. So go away. So the Hassisflay is something we encourage to drink older. I know Sauvignon is all sexy when it's young and fresh and vibrant, but certain wines like Cape Point as well, like our neighbor Klein Constantia, also sit quite tucked into the mountain. Those Sauvignons tend to be really spectacular when you drink them older, and they retain freshness. So that's if Iona is also one. I think one of the wines I had in Iona was which was 9 years old, and it tasted like, we had in a blind tasting, we all thought it was 2 years old. So some pockets are really amazing where it allows you to drink Sauvignon old. But in general, yes, you drink the young, fresh, vibrant. But some pockets you really get rewarded. So I want to brag a bit here. The Hassisflay got the trophy with Old Mutual Trophy Wine Show for trophy for best Sauvignon, and that was a 7-year-old Sauvignon. So it shows you some of them really do well with age. So that's exciting.
There's no denying the awards and the accolades that Buitenverwachting has got, and I think that is. If you look at the history, and actually I'll ask you to go through a little bit of the history as to from the very beginning, but the one thing that's consistent with Buitenverwachting is Lars and his philosophy, and Brad. And Brad's been there, I think, 16 years or 17 years. And, we've seen this with other winemakers and with other properties. The people that know the land and know the grapes and know the seasons and know the nuances are the people that are going to make the wines that are going to win the awards, because it comes with time. Greatness, you hear it a lot. Great wines come with time, and it doesn't just, it's not luck.
I once read an interview that was given by his tutor. He was winemaker at Kanonkop at the time. And so in the interview, he was saying, look, he's been at Kanonkop for like 20 years, and he slowly starts to understand the wines. And I went like, yes, well, this guy's an idiot. Why does it take 20 years for him to understand the farm? And this is now my 30th year over here. And the thing is, you still feel like a novice. So the longer you play the game, the more you understand all the options you have and how you so it really takes a long time. And 30 years for us is a long time. But if you correlate it back to what do you actually do over the 30 years, you only harvest once a year, which actually means, and like in Brad's case, like 16 years, you've actually only made wine 16 times. So it's not 16 years, it's just 16 times you had a chance to make wine. I think that reduces it to really just a few chances that you have in your life. Winemaker on his own, that he's in charge of a cellar, he might only have 20, 25 years, maximum 30 years, but which means he only has 30 chances of making wine, where he can really call the shots. Most of the time, the first 4 or 5 years, he will be under another winemaker. And then later on, he might be too old, because it's physically quite demanding. So there is actually a very few chances that you have in your life, 20 or 30 chances that you have making wine. So 30 years sounds a lot, but in chances that you have, it's very little. So that's why winemakers always get so nervous when it comes to harvest, because there's another chance that you can potentially mess up.
Yeah, and that's also why they sometimes go overseas mid-year to get some more experience.
Yeah.
Can you tell us? I understand a bit of the history, and we have spoken about Constantia in terms of Simon van der Stel and getting granted Constantia in 1685. Don't you want to give us like a brief summary and the stories from there till now?
Simon van der Stel was granted land. So he, as a governor of the Cape, under the Dutch East Indian Company, was granted land. And because as far as I understand, there was no real land ownership. The land belonged to Dutch East Indian Company. And whoever farmed here was leasing the land from the Dutch East Indian Company. So land also meant power. And Simon van der Stel was quite generous in the way that he demarcated a massive area for himself, for his Constantia farm. And that farm was bigger than Amsterdam, where his bosses lived. So once they found out how huge that property was, they then decided that this farm will have to be chopped down. And it was then cut into 5 equal pieces. And Buitenverwachting is one of the original 5 pieces that was chopped up. The other farms, in a way, are lucky that they retained the name Constantia. And we just had this wild guy who decided Buitenverwachting is the name, which is, from a marketing perspective, a nightmare. If you go to America and say Buitenverwachting, they just go, no, what's going on here? We transformed in America from Buitenverwachting to everybody then called us Bite Me for Watching. That was the closest pronunciation that it could get. And in order to make it a bit easier for the Americans, the main label in America is just Buiten. And that's what a lot of people in South Africa just call us. They don't say, let's say, always say Buitenverwachting, just say, oh, I have a Buiten this and I have a Buiten Chardonnay, Buiten Sauvignon, whatever. So in America, we run under Buiten, but on the back label, we explain that the full name is Buitenverwachting. It's just that many locals refer to us just as Buiten.
But Lars, you were not very keen on changing the name because of the history, and it sort of came about because I believe, well, I heard something where you were speaking to whoever it was from the States, and they said, well, what's this name going to be? And someone said, can I have the Buiten, which everyone does because everyone has Buiten. And then that was something you could work with instead of having a completely different name.
Yeah, so my father bought the farm in 1980. And Buitenverwachting, like Klein Constantia, like Constantia Eitzig, all the farms were derelict. Buitenverwachting was lying fallow for about 80 years. So all the vineyards were overgrown with 80-year-old eucalyptus trees. So effectively, it was only down to Goed Constantia, which was a trust under government, that continued making wine, but all the other farms were non-producing anymore. There was a bit of grape growing happening at Steenberg, but all those wines were sold to a co-op in Stellenbosch. So Constantia was, in the 80s, was nothing. And my father paid about, he always correlated with the financial rand as well as a benefit. He paid about the price of a double garage in Germany for Buitenverwachting. So it was really inexpensive. But in South Africa, you say buying a farm is the cheapest part. Developing the baby is where it gets challenging. And we are from the northern part of Germany. And in north, we've got 2 coastal areas. We've got the Baltic. That's where I'm from. And then we've got the North Sea, which links us to the UK. But we used to sail a lot. And if you buy a second-hand boat and you don't like the name of the boat, there's no chance to change the name because it means bad luck and you're going to sink with that baby. And we had the same superstition with Buitenverwachting. Even though we found the name very challenging to market, we were just too superstitious to change the name. And only because, as what you stated now, I mean, I was sitting outside with an American agent. He begged me again over like a decade to change the name. Because we really have amazing ratings in America. We were amongst the top 100 producers in the world 3 times with Wine Spectator. And he just says, look, just give me another name. I said, Andre, we can't just give you another name. Buitenverwachting is the name. And then just by accident, the neighboring table ordered a Buiten Sauvignon. He says, what are they buying? And I said, look, a lot of people just say Buiten. He says, why can't we work like that? So if you look at our American label, so I don't have the label here, it says Buitenverwachting quite prominently in the crest. And at the bottom, we say grown, made, and bottled at Buitenverwachting. But the main label you read is Buiten, just to make it a bit easier. And the funny thing is, when the first stock with the new labels arrived in America, in the first month, our sales in America went up 8-fold. And it's become from a small export market, it went instantly to our biggest export market.
Oh, wow.
So it was quite amazing how the name was quite an obstacle. Yeah. So, but yeah, coming back to the Constantia history. So we were then a fifth of the original Constantia farm, changed names quite often. So Buitenverwachting at one stage was Bergvliet, was Plumstead, and then went back to Buitenverwachting. And then, yeah, so my father then bought the farm in 1980. And in 1990, I took over from my parents and then moved back to Germany. And I had no real background with respect to wine nor farming. I'm from Hamburg, and Hamburg is all about beer. The northern part of Germany is too cold. You can't grow vineyards there. So it was quite a learning curve. But the funny thing is that was part of our success. For me, not understanding or not knowing wine, it really came down to what do I like in wine? And when I went, our winemaker at the time was Jean Daniel, amazing guy. And he dragged me to about 3 tastings, blind tastings with other winemakers per week. And everything they liked, I disliked. And everything that I liked, they thought was very cheap and commercial. I was like tutti frutti. And after a couple of months, I started understanding what wine was about and what you should be looking for if you like quality and stuff like that. And I sat down with Jean and said, John, why don't we just make a wine that you can tick off as a winemaker and has structure and everything else, but also ticks my desires and make it something really more charming. And that's how Buiten Blanc was born. And at a time when I took over the farm, we had a total production of 8,000 cases. Buiten Blanc immediately became a 10,000 case brand in the first year. It went up to 15,000, 20,000. And then at 50,000, we kept it. So that was just because I knew nothing about wine. I came from a normal wine drinker's perspective and just said, look, guys, you winemakers start making wine for yourself. I always compared them to jazz players. When they play free jazz, it's just noise for me. I don't understand what they're doing. They think they're playing the most high-end music. But to me, it was just noise. And the same with wine. They lost a lot of normal consumers, which I was as well, and still am. And I said, look, guys, just give me charming, just give me something that, is relaxing, that I really enjoy. And that, I think that to me is still a very important quality in wine. And then take out the stigmatization. I mean, it was always like when you taste the wine, I said, oh, can you tell the Nevers barrel? And it's like from there, and it's so much skin contact and that. And I think it's just, it's just extra information that's maybe quite interesting. But by the end of the day, I want to be able to take it to my lips and just relax and have a good time, and not always communicate.
I give quite a few tours, and I have been. There's no tours happening at the moment. And we would you bring people over, and between the agents and the people booking the tours, they'd say no, they want a high-end tour, and they've got a group that specialized wine, no wines, and on top of it. But it's actually the person who put the order in, the guy who's paying or the woman who's paying for the tour, and the rest are the family or friends who actually, they like wine, but they just want to taste it or drink it. And so it actually, in a real practical sense, can't be about acids and the sugars and the wildest gooseberries from South Tahiti. It's got to be about the stories, so that, and then when you're traveling from one destination to the next, you can start speaking about the detail to one person. Otherwise, everyone's eyes glaze over, and that's not what you want. So.
I mean, you talk about stories. One of my favorites. We I always believe you don't have to make everything yourself. And if you look at the Werner Constant story, I think it's an amazing story, very important to the valley. And Klein Constantia captured really well. So there was a professor who purchased initially Goed Constantia in the 80s and said, look, guys, this is the story about Constantia. Historically, those wines were in all royal families in Europe. And he felt that Goed Constantia should run it. And the guys in charge at the time just felt, sweet wine isn't something that was of interest to them. So they ignored it. And then the professor went over to Klein Constantia and contacted the owners, Dougie Hughes at the time. And Dougie just felt, this guy's quite a nuisance here. But, in order to keep him quiet, he just decided to now go with the story and selected about 4 or 5 hectares of Muscat de Fontainebleau just to keep the guy quiet. And that's how the icon story or icon wine started for them. And I always felt like, how much sweet wine do I really drink? It's not a lot. And if I want something, I just go over to Klein Constantia and either we swap out wine or I buy the bottle from them. Really cool neighbors. And then when Dougie turned 80, 70, when he phoned me and says, look, Lars, my birthday, why don't you come over? And, I'm opening a special bottle of wine, but you've got to buy me a good present here. And so I'm like, okay, go. So I go out and buy him a really special present, 70th birthday. And plus there was a bit of a reward. I'm getting a great wine here from him. So I arrived there and I wish him good, happy birthday, give him a present. And then the old man pours me that syrupy wine. And I go like, Dougie, what's going on here? So it was like, could see it was brown, it was oxidized, had stuff floating in it, like a lot of sediments. So I wasn't very impressed. I actually felt very tricked because I really made an effort with a present, and he gives me some stuff that he dug out of a cellar. And he goes like, okay, Lars, what's going on? I see you're unhappy. I said, well, I think you tricked me. And he says, nah, but what do you think this is? So I tasted it, it's a sweet wine. And he says, yeah, what do you think it is? And I went like, okay, well, you started the Vin de Constance story and you're very passionate about this. So maybe it's an old Vin de Constance. And he says, yeah, you're right, old Vin de Constance. And he says, now, what do you think how old the wine is? And I went like, well, no, I don't know, you're 70 years old, so maybe it's definitely tastes old. Maybe it's around 70 years. And he says, do you think the wine is still alive? And I said, like, yeah, no, it's oxidized, it's tired, but yes, it's still alive. He says, okay, and you think it's 70 years old? And I said, yeah, I think, I'm just guessing, but because you're 70, I think the wine is somewhere there as well. It definitely looks old. And he says, no, the wine is from 1791.
Wow.
So the wine was, when I tasted it, was over 200 years old. French Revolution was exactly around that time period as well. So give and take 2 or 3 years. So not only was the wine like 2 centuries old, it was also made in the most primitive style. So what I showed you earlier on here, that cellar there, it's got a cork floor, it's got a wooden ceiling. I don't think they really had much flowing water at the time. So it was made in the most primitive style, bacterially completely dodgy, and oxidative. And they put that stuff in the bottle. Now, if you transport wines to Europe now and it travels for 3 weeks over the ocean, gets rattled by the diesel engine and goes past the equator and heats up to 35 degrees, it's not lekker for any wine. That stuff, the Vin de Constance, by law, the majority had to be shipped to the UK. So it sailed for 4 months, got heated up lekker when it was passing the equator. And so it was made in the most primitive way. It traveled under really harsh conditions. Was stored in the UK, and I don't know what conditions. That most probably wasn't too bad. But then it was still drinkable after 200 years, and I was just flabbergasted.
Did you ask him to get you a nice present?
I should have. So good old Dougie's still alive. But yeah, so that family sold on now, sold Plain Constantia, but he still lives in the neighborhood. But I told Dougie, I says, I was so overwhelmed. I said, look, Dougie, I'm sorry. I know it's your story, but I've got to make the stuff myself. I can't be in Constantia and ignore a wine of that significance, because I'm obviously hoping that my kids eventually will take over, and they will kick my backside for the rest of my life if I ignore something like that. So we're also making a wine, which is the similar, which is also based on the Muscat de Fontainebleau. But Plain Constantia at the time had their sweet wine in barrels for about 5 years. We're doing 8-9 months. They used to have about 250 grams of sugar. We're doing 120, 130. So we wanted quite a bit more fresher. And then we're obviously using a different bottle. We use a bottle that you find in Turkey in Hungary, which is also a great dessert wine region. And the reason why we use it is because our neighboring suburb, Turkey, is named after the Hungarian dessert wine region. So we try to at least have a different story. And we just call it 1769, because if you go to our main homestead, which is, well, I don't know, no, it's blocked by the big tree there. But it's on the other side of the lawn. On the gable, it says 1796. But when I went to the Cape Archives and got from the Elliot collection, which was a photographer, or he was a land surveyor, but he took about 15,000 pictures of the Cape. 11 pictures he took at the turn of the century from 1890 to 1910, 1911. The oldest pictures of our homestead actually show the date 1769, and then the younger picture shows 1796. So what those guys did is they renovated the manor house and then mixed up those numbers. And I'm too scared to go up there, up the gable, and start chiseling away. So I keep that date, but in order to bring the original date back, that wine is called 1769. So, and it's done quite well. Let me brag again. Got 5 stars with Platter last year, and got trophy for best dessert wine 2 years in a row. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, but I mean, I also like to tie in Goed Constantia. They've got a dessert wine, the Grand Constance. And what they've done is they've got red muscadel and white muscadel, completely different wine. I love it. Really amazing story as well. And what they've done is they've got the original bottle which was broken from and they got those glass pieces from a monastery in the UK, and they glued it all together and then went to Consul and said, like, replicate that bottle. So they've got the original skew bottle, looks super cool, and it's got an odd size. I think it's a 187 milliliter bottle. And yeah, it's so the 3 farms definitely picked up on the history of the dessert wine story of Constantia. So to me it's great. And we all have our different characters when it comes to those wines. So Klein Constantia got their character, Goed Constantia their character, and we've got our angle at making the wine.
I know Matt and Buller well. The story was told to me, and I try and impart it to as many people as possible, is that you should always have a bottle of bubbly and a bottle of dessert wine in your fridge, because either you're happy or you're sad. And if you're happy, you can celebrate with the bubbly. But if you're sad, you need to drink the dessert wine, and that'll make you happy. So then you're able to drink the bubbly.
You just drink both.
Okay, I better stock up on my fridge because I failed on that one. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah.
So I don't know. Just in terms of we're talking about your wines, and obviously you've got top end, high quality wines. Tell us about your philosophy. I mean, your philosophy, and I think it would be the same as Brad's or anyone who's involved there, because it's definitely that this is a product of more than one person, and everyone's got the same ethos, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, it's definitely a team effort. And my philosophy, in a way, anyway, is that I am not the winemaker, and I put a lot of trust and faith in what Brad is doing. So he is really in charge of the cellar. That's his baby. So I see my role as selecting the right winemaker for our property. But once I've selected him, then he is fully in charge and responsible of what is happening. And winemaking, I think, is almost a misleading job description, because everything actually hinges on the vineyards. So it is more about managing a vineyard than making the wine. Making the wine is fairly straightforward, but managing the vineyard and telling my farm manager of what you expect from the vineyard is, I think, that is your major task. That is your winemaker needs to be involved with the soil, with the plant, and everything that goes around it. So your farm manager always needs the guidance. And then he needs to put into work through our staff. So and the nice thing is, as I said, we are sort of like, maybe it's a bit of a cliche, but we are really one team, because then, first of all, whatever you do in the vineyard is, as I said, translates into quality that you have in the bottle later on. But it's also, you find that quite often grapes get picked and then they go into the cellar, and then they might get reselected and just want to have the good stuff. But because all my staff live on the farm and they've been doing so for, most of them for 20, 25 years as well. Some of them started with my father already. So they're looking at 40 years. They know the quality of grapes that we're looking for. So we don't really need to select anything in the cellar because it all gets selected already through picking. That's why we never started, looking at a mechanical harvester, because you make the quality in the grapes, but then you also got to pick the right grapes. So you need to make sure that underripe grapes get discarded. You cut them off; they fall in the ground. Anything that might be affected through rot. We have a couple of bird problems, so they pick on the healthy grapes, and then as soon as they pierce a hole in it, it starts rotting. Bacteria goes in there. So you've got to discard all those things. And that's where the quality starts. So, we don't like to make a differentiation between the guy who picks in the vineyards or works in the vineyards or manages the vineyards or makes the wine, because it's if you have a weak link in there, the whole system falls apart. So everybody is really important. Now during lockdown, I don't know whether I can put this out in public, but I tell my staff, I said, I go home and I have a glass of wine. And I want you to have the same comfort, So we give out free wine during lockdown now every Friday, and I want my staff to, and as I said, that goes for everyone. And as long as they consume the wine responsibly, so don't get drunk and whatever else comes with it, then we play the game and it works wonderfully. So we've got 100 kids on the farm, we've got 100, close to 150 adults on the farm. And it's jovial. Fridays are really lekker. You can hear the people having fun, having braais and stuff like that. And nobody goes overboard because they know the system stops as soon as we find that alcohol gets misused. So we actually had we had one little break where 6 girls were fighting over one boy and it got very loud and everything else. And we said, look, guys, the deal is, drink it quietly at home, and if it brings up any bravado, by consuming wine, I stop the game. So we had one weekend where we ran dry, and now we're back to normal. So I hope everybody who listens to this thing don't run to police stations and tell anybody. But I really want everybody to be on the same level. So if Brad can take his wine home, why not the guy who is really crucial in selecting the grapes? And that's the vineyard guys,
So Lars, there's 2 things there. You've got a whole community, so it's not just people staying. It's lifts to shops, and a whole community working with you in a synergistic way. And the other thing is, most wineries, and I know this, when they hire their staff, it's usually seasonal, to take into consideration the peaks that happen during harvest or whatever. And your staff are permanent.
They're all of them. We find we have work throughout the year. Now, obviously, you can relax a bit, but there's a lot of time now for us to groom the farm. So there's a lot of things that we, where the dam overflows, that whole river section needs to be sorted out. We've got a bit of cattle on the farm, because we try to do as much organic farming as possible, and the cattle is just a bit rough with the fencing. If they decide to go somewhere else, they just break the fences, so we've got to fix all those fences again. So now is a little bit of more idle time. We're removing some vineyards. There was one vineyard, unfortunately, was heavily infected with virus, beautiful Cabernet Franc block, so we're just cutting that off. That's amazing briarwood now. So there's a lot of stuff that we do now, where we groom the farm, we look after the farm and make it pretty. I don't know, we can hear in the background, there's a bit of shouting. So the guys all playing soccer now at the moment. There's not 2 teams of 11. I think it's like 2 teams of 20. So they're all in the paddocks now, and they're playing soccer. And then we've got, as I say, we've got 100 kids on the farm. We've got a little kindergarten on the farm. They get 4 meals a day. We've got some retired folks on the farm. That's why we also, when we say lockdown, we've been working, but we don't allow outside guys to come to the farm, so even relatives where the granny lives on the farm, they're not allowed to visit them because there's obviously danger that the old people will get infected, and they are the most vulnerable. So we want to look after them. So we've got about 12 people that are fully retired. And I mean, they all hang around the paddock fences now and watch the young guys playing soccer. So it's a real lekker community that we've got here. And yeah, a lot of guys now start also cutting wood. That's like their sideline business.
That's your Cabernet Franc block.
That they're doing work time, but we've got a lot of trees here that we also want to remove a lot of aliens. And they cut that down and then chop it up, and then sell it. So they, that's a bit of a sideline, but it's a good additional income for them. And I must say they've we encourage also saving. So instead of going to the banks and having this ridiculous interest rates, because I saw some of our guys signed up for like 30% interest per year. That's hectic. So we also got a bit of a education program going where we go and talk about finances and what is a better way of not getting sucked into debt. And with chopping wood and having sideline businesses, it helps the farm because they remove the trees after hours, but it helps them because they earn good money there as well.
Well, you've answered one question, because a lot of people there's a chat thing here asking whether they can come get a job with you so that they can get paid in wine because they've run out. And unfortunately, no, because that's already been taken.
Yeah. Unfortunately, jobs are a bit scarce at the moment. We actually had carte blanche on the farm today. They interviewed us and wanted to find out how we affected with the lockdown. And at one stage we were allowed to export, then it was taken away again, and now it started up again. But I think the wine industry in general went through a tough stage. We suffered already in December quite heavily, like everybody else, with the power outages. I think a lot of restaurants took strain. If you shut down a restaurant for 2 hours or 4 hours of no power, it affects wine sales at the same time. So December was already quite a challenging month. And now, I mean, as I explained for carte blanche as well, we thought 3 weeks lockdown and an extension 5 weeks. Okay, this is, you have a choice. Does the cellar burn down, or do you want to shut down my business for 4 weeks? I'd rather take the 4 weeks. But as you go along now, you actually realize that so many companies are taking strain, so many restaurants, hotels are shutting down, that they can't pay, or they don't pay. And so the payments for sales that happen in February, we only get part paid. In March, I don't know March sales should be paid by the end of this month, and I expect a massive drop as well. April, we had no sales, and whatever we might be selling in May will only get paid in July, August. So we have effectively been affected for 6 months. I don't want to cry on everybody's shoulder, because I think everybody is taking massive strain. And it's difficult to say, look, let's put money over lives. But this is a hardcore situation. And I see everywhere around the world, even though infection rates are quite high and death rates are still, they're coming down, but they're all opening their economies now, because they realize they can't play this game forever. And we're looking at, stronger countries like Germany, even they are caving in now, because they realize you can't do this forever, and we can't afford to do this forever. So it's a tough situation. And I mean, there are a lot of other people out there, hairdressers and whatever, they're just in a similar boat. We just sit here with quite large overheads that we need to continue paying it, and we just need to find a perfect balance of how do we manage continuing with a farm, but at the same time have a zero income. So it's
Lars, and I can understand. I mean, well, I can't understand to the extent that you've got, but I just know from the industries I'm involved in, I'm part owner of now 6 restaurants in London, and we are seriously looking down the barrel of having to shut those down. And I mean, I find myself, just personally for everyone, I find myself remarkably not stressed out about it. I'm not sure why. I have no idea why, actually, but because I feel that there's going to be an opportunity that comes, but things need to open up in all categories, all spheres. But let's get on to Constantia Fresh. Can I do that? Can I change? Yeah. Okay, so just before Lars gets onto the Constantia Fresh, and me personally, and I believe everyone else here, seriously, Lars, hope Buiten and all these other wineries and all the distributors and everyone and the whole tourism and hospitality, it's all impacted, comes right and quickly. I hope that they release these channels. On a lighter note, in terms of Constantia Fresh, it's, for me, it has been, because I've been going to it for so long, the penultimate wine show, wine festival. And I know why. And the tickets aren't cheap, but the numbers are always limited. You can get food and you can get wine, and you don't get stubs where you have to now figure out how you're going to use them. Everyone engages and talks. You've got live music, you've got beautiful sun usually, and it's just, for me, it is the creme de la creme of all of the things. I mean, I do like the Champagne Festival in Franschhoek and some others, the Bastille, but when did that start? Because it wasn't always with Buiten, eh, Lars?
No, we were the, look, I'm the venue. So it was a brainchild of Jörg Pfützner. He's a sommelier that came to South Africa from Germany.
Yeah.
He worked at Aubergine.
Yeah,
and then so Jörg started it, and then Higo and his sister Anurath took over. I think their organizational skills are really great.
Yeah.
And the idea was really to have like-minded farms that offer fresher, vibrant wines, and we were looking for hosting a venue like that, and to put out a show like that is very, very expensive. So we would have loved to do this as Constantia producers, but we're only 10. And I think, first of all, from a consumer perspective, there's just too little to taste. You want more variety. So I think that alone was, but also to put something out like that is so expensive that we would have to subsidize it with about 100,000 rand per farm, and none of us have that kind of budget. So what Anurath and Higo are doing is they giving every exhibitor who's coming here, so all the other wine farms that are coming out here in the middle of the harvest and making an effort to stay on a Sunday, they instead of charging them a fee to be here, they're saying, look, you have to commit to 20 tickets. And whether they then on-sell the tickets or whether they hand them out to customers or whatever is up to them. And then the other half of the tickets that are available are sold through Anurath and Higo. But it has to be a collaboration of all the farms and ticket sales in order to make this event possible. Because just the hire of all the equipment and getting the chefs paid and getting the food paid and getting the umbrellas and everything else is so massive that unfortunately there has to come with a comparatively high ticket price. But I love the event, and I like to take myself back and say, look, we're not the organizer. We're just the convenient venue. In other words, we've got this nice site which is behind me, and we've got parking where my cows are normally grazing, and that makes it convenient to host it with us. We would also like to showcase other farms, but the infrastructure to host it is quite hardcore, because you need parking for about 1,000 people. And then you need to have a venue where people can stroll around. So I end up having to host with a burden, and I'm known to be a bit anal about my lawn. So I cry the whole day because I see 1,000 people trampling down my lawn and people hammering in stakes to hold umbrellas. So, from being the venue, it comes with a lot of wear and tear. And for another 2 weeks, I live with a scarred lawn and everything else.
Wow.
But I think it's worth the event. I love it.
Yeah.
And I just, what sort of, I cringe before the whole thing starts. But when I see all those people just having such a great time, that's the reward for me. I go like, okay, well, I have to live with the scars afterwards, but it is worth it because, everybody's having a great time. So, I mean, me included.
It's got a dress up theme, usually colors. And I was trying to think of colors, and we couldn't do pink or we couldn't do mustard because that has been done. But it's not only, yes, there's different wine, which I think is great. It's also now got craft beer, it's got gins, it's got the food from some of the chefs from within the valley, and I know I was there. But but for me, it's the vibe. It's for some it might be too constantial, but I don't get that. I just get, you don't have a whole lot of people running around getting absolutely drunk and being silly.
No,
you get a beautiful afternoon, and it's just, and then the music comes in, and then it's finished, and a lot of the people, I mean, I Uber all the time because
I mean, if you what I find amazing is it's on a Sunday now. It's literally in the middle of the harvest. It's always the last Sunday of February. So all the winemakers or whoever is representing the farms are making an effort in the middle of the harvest. And then the chefs, they work their butts off. I had Frank arrive here, from Food Barn, and he started setting up, and he was joyful. And I asked him, I said, "What do you want, a beer or gin and tonic or whatever?" So he opted for gin and tonic. No, beer. It was quite a warm day last time. And 15 minutes later, I saw that, he worked so hard. You saw that queue developing, and he just, he was very professional. But it is, I mean, for the guys exhibiting, and especially for the chefs, it is it's really a hard day. But they all keep on smiling, and I think they all get the vibe, so that's what I find amazing. And I said that keeps me going at it, because sometimes I go like, season has been always good to us. As I said, the lawn behind me on a normal Saturday is 1,000 people, and it's really nice to have. And then Sundays we closed. Unfortunately, we're the only lazy farmer that are closed or lazy farm that's closed on Sundays here in the valley. But we need that break. So to get hammered with fresh is quite taxing. But as I said, if you look at how many people are having a great time here, and how jovial the whole thing is, it's really worth it. Really worth it.
I mean, how old is it?
Yeah, and for the farms, it's not a money thing. It's not that there's any financial reward. They're really just here to showcase their great wines. But it's not that they walk away here with big orders or have made a lot of money through that day. It's really that it just like see the opportunity of showcasing their great wines, and allowing everybody to have a great Sunday.
Tell me, how old is that tree in the middle of your lawn?
So we can only work off those old photos, but Buitenverwachting is now 250 years old, and we think it was planted in the early days when the buildings went up. So it will be somewhere around there. We get also asked quite often how tall that tree is. And when Herman Kirschbaum was still winemaker here, he worked off the shadow and the height, sort of worked with angles, and he thought it was about 38 meters high. And then somebody came with a drone and said, no, it's actually close to 50 meters. So it's just under 50 meters high. So it's really, really amazing. And so if you look at the surrounding oak trees, they're all about 200 years old. They are midgets compared to the Norfolk pine that's in the middle of the the lawn. And the funny thing is, when my father purchased the farm, the guy who they got in to help with the gardens, he said, no, that tree has to go. He wants to cut it down. And my father said, if you take that tree down, I take you down. They said, nobody's touching that tree. So my father unfortunately passed away, but he's buried on the farm. And I know that tree was his pride and joy. And we, in the family, we still regard it as the feature. So when we cut the lawn, we cut in circles around the tree. That is really our center stage.
And I see at the Constantia Fresh, it's all the Constantia wineries are stuck in the shade of that tree because it gets super hot. I don't know if any of you have been there.
Yeah, no, we're very unapologetic about taking center stage there. But a lot of farms in Constantia felt like we should do just a limit to Constantia farms, but it just wouldn't be the same.
No,
I think it's just a choice of. And it's not that we want to be excluding other areas, but we just felt, it would be nice to have a Constantia event, which is just around Constantia. But first of all, to pull that off is, we at Eitzig, Constantia Eitzig, Karen Wiltshire organized the food and wine show. And she attracted over 3 days about 10,000 people.
Wow.
It was massive. And we then, as farms, obviously were center stage, and it was just limited to Constantia. Every farm, just through wine consumption, lost over 60,000 Rand. So that event was so successful, it almost bankrupted all the farms here. So, you need to pull in other farms to make it worth your while and to share the cost. Otherwise, you just can't host those events. Yeah.
So I think, there's so many stories, and Buiten for me, I'll go there and go have a coffee. I'll sit on the lawn with Sienna. I'll go taste wine. It's beautiful. It's got history. It's got romance. It's got all those kind of things. But we can talk about stories forever. I'm just going to open it up. Does anyone have any questions for Lars? I've chatted a lot. So if you do, he's sitting there. He's probably getting quite cold now, though, hey, Lars?
Hey, we're chilling. Wine's getting warmer, I'm getting colder.
Go for it, guys, if you want to ask.
I just want to tell a little story about Lars. I didn't meet him that long ago, last year sometime, and it was at one of the many festivals that he's put on for all the Red parents. And me not being a Red parent, I just gate crashed the party, as I usually do, and I'm standing next to Lars, and after about 45 minutes of drinking good wine with an odd gin and beer thrown in, I turn to my mate and I say, this is so cool. How does he fit into the circle? And my mate Mikey says, this is actually the wine farm owner. So if we're talking unpretentious, that's Lars. Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, look, I think it's you can either choose to run a farm as a true spirit of a farm, or you can turn it into like a sterile park. And we really want to have a farm here. So I used to have chickens running around here as well, but the owl thought they were quite delicious and they just charred them all. But the more I see, the more we turn it into a farm, and we have the cattle and we have sheep and we have, I organized those. I researched what chickens they had 200 years ago, and apparently there was a Dutch breed that is called koekoek. They look quite similar to guinea fowls, and I imported them but I got them from a breeder in Bloemfontein, and we brought them here to the farm, and we started breeding them on the farm, and they are super cool. And the more we turn this into a farm appeal, I think the more people felt like this is authentic, so. And I can't run around here in a suit and tie and pretend I'm a farmer. So it's good to be just relaxed and really enjoy of what you're doing here.
I'm just going back to the wines because someone's asked about the wines. Yes, obviously Constantia Sauvignon Blanc, but you also do Red Bordeaux. And I know you've got two wines. One's equally balanced, I guess, with all the Bordeaux grapes, and you've got a more Cab Sav dominated. And then there's a limited release. Am I right in saying that you've got like an experimental or limited release or kind of wines?
So we've got, I stopped Merlot, I stopped Cabernet Sauvignon as single varietals, and we really, on the red wines, we are down to 2 blends. One is called Myford, and Myford is the name of my family crest. And then we've got the Christine, which is my mother. Myford is now about 130, 140 Rand a bottle. And that is my favorite wine. It's amazing. I mean, again, with the awards, 2 years ago at Trophy Wine Show, it might be 3 years ago, it won best Bordeaux blend in South Africa. And that is my favorite. So it's 2 years in barrels, but the barrels are 2-year-old barrels, 4-year-old barrels, up to 5-6-year-old barrels. So the older the barrels, the lesser of the wood influence, and then you get more of your wine purity for me. So our cheaper wine is the one, our cheaper red blend is the one that I always promote. I love it. It's really amazing. And Christine is like my mother. It's difficult, and it's expensive. So it's only new barrels. Now with our current exchange rate, you're looking at about a 20,000 Rand cost per barrel. And that makes your wine expensive. And then Christine has got 50% Cabernet Franc, 50% Cabernet Sauvignon, and the Cabernet Franc component makes it really difficult. It tastes more like a whiskey. It's dark chocolates, it's tobaccos, and to me, the magic in wine is, like I told the story early on with Plain Consentia, is that you have grape juice that you can drink in 20, 30, and in the extreme case, 200 years time. And that's what Christine is about. So if you want a wine that you want to really enjoy now or for the next 5-10 years, the Myford is my choice. And Christine is something that you need to treat like my mother. You have to really engage with the wine. You have to decant the wine. You have to allow the wine to breathe. You have to drink it over 2 or 3 days. Actually, your third day is most probably the best day. So it's not like the lady where you walk up and give her a smack on the bottom and go like, how's it going, Schnooky? You got to treat her with a lot of respect. And that's what Christine is about. So, but it's a really difficult wine. But I think to me, it's magnificent if you look at a wine that you can drink in decades to come. And then when it comes to limited releases, what transpires in the past is we come across something. So it's not experimental wines, but there's always a crazy story developing somewhere. So for instance, in 2015, we had those very devastating fires in Constantia. And our best Cabernet Sauvignon block, it didn't burn down. We were lucky, but it got so smoke tainted that we just couldn't use it for great wine. And then we looked at the last varietals that we always pick is Petit Verdot. And it was also covered in ashes and it looked bad, but we tasted grapes and we're like, hang on, but this stuff is not affected. And because we were also focusing on fighting the fires and saving the farms and our thatched buildings and everything else, we harvested the Petit Verdot far too late. So it ended up with about a 16.25 alcohol. But if you translate Petit Verdot, Petit means small, Verdot means verde, means green. So if you go to Bordeaux, Petit Verdot is always small and green. And with us, it wasn't dissimilar. So you use Petit Verdot maybe to just freshen up a bit, use that greenness to give your wine a bit of a kick. And now because we couldn't harvest anymore, and because we were delayed by the fire and everything else, we harvested the Petit Verdot with so much sugar that it translated up with this massive alcohol, and it was the most delicious Petit Verdot we ever made. And because the story of the fire and the ashes, we called the wine the Phoenix. And so when we bottled the wine, it was so amazing. We put it into our wine tasting, and it outsold everything we had. And we warned everybody. We said, look, this is a wine with 16.25 alcohol. It sits big. And everybody turned like, no, this is too hot. And when I tasted it, they bought cases and cases. And the wine was quite expensive, but it outsold everything we had. So after 6 weeks, the wine was gone.
Awesome.
And that's what the limited releases are all about. They are wines that tell the story. So we had a vineyard where it sits at a really not a good place for vineyards. A lot of, potentially a lot of rot. So we planted a vineyard there, or a varietal there that is not susceptible to rot, which is Viognier. And in the first year, we harvested a bit too early. The wine ended up being quite hard, a lot of like orange wine character. Next year, we went in a lot later, and it was too hot. It was just too alcoholic, was just unbalanced. In the third year, everything was perfect. It had like this very charming pear characters and so on. So that wine we call Third Time Lucky, because, excuse my French, we fucked it up twice, but on the third time we really got it right. So we've got a wine called Third Time Lucky. Then we've got a Sauvignon where it sits on a vineyard where it goes so opulent yellow fruit that it reminds you more of a Chardonnay than anything else. So we don't like Sauvignon barrels, but that one was so different. And we said, and then Brad said, let's just try this in barrels. So we put it in barrels, and the concept was like, just gently 3 months. And after 3 months, the wine just said, don't touch me. I'm not done here. And after 6 months, we want to take it out, and it wouldn't allow us to take it out. After 9 months, 10 months, we took out the Chardonnay, we wanted to take out that Sauvignon as well, and he was still fighting us. And when we realized the wine is actually, rejecting us and fighting us, we gave him the name the Gladiator, so Maximus. And then after a year, it still didn't want to come out. And after 2 years, when we took out the reds, we took out the Gladiator as well. So we've got the Sauvignon, which we don't call Sauvignon, we just call the Maximus, because it was just fighting us the whole time. So it's just, those wines, we try something different, and if we get rewarded, there's normally a story that comes with the wine, or the nickname that we develop with the wine, and then it comes out. But those wines, we most of the time we actually limit them to the farm, and it also keeps it interesting for anybody who comes to the farm. Otherwise, you say, look, we know your Buiten Blanc, we know your Sauvignon. What else is going on here? So those limited releases are also limited to the farm, and they're almost exclusive to whoever who makes the effort to come to the farm. They can taste those wines. So we've got it hasn't been released yet, but we've got a Pinot Noir.
Oh, wow.
Which was the other way around. It didn't want to be in barrels. So after 3 months, Brad realized that the wine wasn't coping in barrels. So he took it out, and we called it the Restless, because it was just too restless to stay in barrels. But the year before, the Pinot Noir wanted to stay in barrels for a long time. And we just call it Block 8 because that's the name of the vineyard. So we've, it's all those things that we've got going on here.
Harry, this might be a good time to explain that we're coming.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This is a good time to explain. So, I said that I'm part of, I do some tours, and it's usually for the international crowd, but that's not happening till, I think we're estimating October, November. So we're going to put some local tours together with this group and with whoever wants to be involved. And we can taste Maximus and these things if you still got, or what the latest thing is. But even if that doesn't happen, I'm definitely coming to taste some of these wines because they sound delicious. They sound
they're very different, and some of them are controversial. As I said, a wine with 16.25, every journalist went like, "Yo, that's not wine anymore." But we didn't add alcohol. It's just the wine fermented to that level, and that's the story of the wine. And the nice thing is, nobody has to commit to anything. You just come, you taste the wine, and you can see whether it works for you or doesn't work for you. So that's cool. And we see, for instance, with the Restless, the youngsters that work on the farm, then they prefer our whites, and the reds they find maybe a bit too tannic, a bit too tight. But the Restless is a big hit with them. So I can't wait to bring that wine out when lockdown is done. So, but it's a really delicious Pinot Noir, really cool. Well, I think it's cool. But then again, wine is personal.
Lars, can I ask a very, very dull and unwiney question? I want to ask about insurance, because after the fires, the dreadful fires that I remember watching creep around the mountain,
yeah.
How are you insured? Do you insure blocks of vines, considering some vines will be so old? How does that work if you lose a vineyard?
Well, like, nobody can, I don't think anybody can afford to insure vineyards, and even if you could, you actually can't. There's no insurance that makes it available. So that but coming back to insurance, we've got business interruption, and funny enough, it covers shark scare, and and it covers our current scenario. It covers the COVID-19.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, we are onto it now, and our insurance company, I don't want to mention their name now, has changed the terms, because obviously it's a massive risk for them. So from the 1st of May, I think now, we're not covered for this anymore. But for March and April, we were actually covered for a dreaded disease.
Wow.
Yeah. But look, we will see how the insurance will cover, and we'll sort this out. That's still in SARS, and I'm sure there's a lot of negotiations going on, and it's about 20% of our insurance cost is business interruption. So, I hope the insurance will come to the party. But dread disease with virus is insured. We're insured for it.
It's pretty disruptive.
And shark disease, shark scare, but that hasn't happened here.
Now, maybe after a rugby game, when they come and they start scrubbing.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a question from Wendy, just on the Hussey's Flay. You're drinking that a little older. What would you consider older for a cool climate SA Sauvignon? 10 years.
With wine, it's so organic. There's no rule of what vintage is going to perform well with age. So 2012 is tasting so fresh that you would think this is a 2018, 2019 vintage. So it's unbelievable. But we also find that the Hussey's Flay in the 3rd year goes through a phase where you got a lot of that Flintstone character. And if you go to France, you've got the 2 main regions, which is Sancerre and Pouilly-Fumé. And Fumé is fumes, is smoke. So fumes is that smoky character, is a very intrinsic character for Sauvignon, or can be. And we find that in our Hussey's Flay in the 3rd year, quite often, it shows that character, which I actually don't like. I find it off-putting. So I never drink Hussey's Flay in the 3rd year. And I wait but you will only find that character will last for 6 to 9 months. And when we pass that stage, then it really does a huge curve up, and it's sexy, really nice. And that's what wines do. They go through their organic phases, and sometimes you hit a wave where the wine is actually not nice. And then when it comes out of it again, then it's like super amazing. So you could always give a wine a second chance. If you find now, if it goes through that transition phase, don't give away the wine for birthday presents or whatever. Just maybe contact the farmer and or producer and say, what's going on here? Is it now over the hill, or is there a second wave coming? And very often in a cooler climate or really well-made wines have amazing phases coming later on, So
all of the teenage years, Lars.
Exactly. Exactly.
Cool. Listen, I know it's getting late,
but he's in the dark now. He's going through his teenage years, but he's a lot older than he's in his. How old are you? You actually shouldn't be outside. Over 60s shouldn't be outside anymore.
51.
51. Okay.
Now listen, I know it's getting dark. Lars, thanks so much. If there are any questions, what usually happens with this, we would have been cut off twice, but I've paid up, so we didn't get cut off. But it ends up being a social gathering now where people just drink and chat amongst themselves. So Lars, thanks so much. Really, that was amazing. Thanks for being so honest and things.
Awesome. So hopefully we can do this quite soon on the farm. It would be nice to have a person.
Let's do it, because this crowd, they're pestering me to organize tours, and one of them will definitely be the Constantia route, you know, and
Awesome.
Lars,
it's on that lawn.
I'm going to jump in here before you go to say I live in Joburg, and so obviously whenever I come to Cape Town, I try and see as many people as I can, which kind of like lands up feeling, I imagine it's how the child of divorced parents feels during handover. And so my favorite handover spot is the big tree at your farm as I go from one friend to the next. So
okay,
that's
great.
my Buiten story from Joburg.
I'm here the whole time, and most of the time at least. And anybody who wants to contact me, either info@Buitenverwachting, so they will forward it to me, or my first name, Lars, Lars, @Buitenverwachting. I'd love to have you guys here. It would be really cool.
And Lars, I'll text you.
If I get left behind by any friends, then I'll call the head office then.
Exactly. Actually, we had it at last day of lockdown. Somebody got lost here on the farm. It took us about an hour and a half to find that person.
So I'll post this all on Harry's Big Wine Adventure on Instagram and Facebook. I'll text you, and I'll just get all your hashtags if you want. We need to get it out.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there, and good luck. Be safe, and you know where to find us.
We attended a wine and food pairing at one of the Sea Point hotels. We were fortunate to have you hosting the wine. You might remember it.
Yes, awesome, yeah.
And you had some very nice wines of yours, including a MCC. Do you still have that?
We have lots of it. We can't sell it because the bottles we got can't handle the pressure, and there's always that danger that they will explode. So unfortunately, it's all stuck in our cellar, and we're trying to find a solution for it. But at the moment, we can't do anything with it because it's just too dangerous.
There's a solution.
Harry, we'll help. Tell him.
Yeah, we're the solution. Okay, so maybe what you should come do is and drink some of your MCC. I think that's the plan.
Okay, awesome. Yes, I didn't. That sounds like a good thing. You know, when Terry told me that we're doing this for like 40 minutes or longer, I said, wow, how can we do it for such a long time? But, you know, I think just time flew. We had fun. It was amazing. Thanks for everybody for listening and tasting.
Lars,
Awesome.
thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Lars. Thank you. Thank you, Harry.
Cheers.